Okay, so yeah, it's Curtis and we need to hear from This is Marriage UK, and this is our first shoot of asking the question, where are the men
in the church available for committed relationships and marriage?
Yep, and they're in the background listening and smiling, and they are ready to go. We're going to have this discussion because we need to understand where is the potential for marriage and relationships in the church. It's been a pressing question for so long, and we're addressing it now with our research and our discussions. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Hi, my name's Kimberly, Kim for short. I'm 33 years old. I'm originally from Sheffield, born and raised, but I'm based in East London. And where are the men in the church? I think they're there, but there's just a lot of fear. I'm just going to put that there.
Hi, my name's Diane. I am originally from London. Where are the men in the church? That is a very fantastic question. I think that there's been some hesitation in how they pursue, and I'll leave it there.
Hi, my name is Marika. I'm 30 years old, I'm Italian, and I live around northwest London. And well, where are the men in church? I hope we can find out after this discussion.
Hi, my name is Kojo. I'm from Birmingham, and where are the men in the church? They're in the streets.
Hey, I'm Greg, I'm 27. Been coming to church for 5.5, 6 years, but spent a good portion of my time running away from God. And yeah, I think a lot of guys are doing exactly that.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. So, guys, listen, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
On our research, where are the men in the church? So many years, women have been saying, where are the men? Can't find any men in the church. Which kind of, at the time I was hearing this, especially as a young man, I would never have projected in the future to see that so many men have left. And the big question is, why do you think that is? Because that means the outcome is the potential for marriage is just disappearing. What are the men doing and where are they? And Kojo, you raised something there, but if you want to kick off, where are the men in the church for marriage? That's the question.
I mean, listen, let me be honest with you. I think for the men, it's very difficult in 2025, you know. I was talking to Greg about this earlier on. I think for a lot of men, community is not in church for us, you know what I mean? Right, our focus is about finances and money and making sure we secure ourselves. And because obviously community, I think when we're in UK specifically, we're quite individualistic. So it's about making sure that you've got your stuff sorted. Church ain't helping with that, no offense. You know what I mean? So if church is not helping with that, then church doesn't benefit me, you know? And I think also for a lot of us as men as well, we're a little bit emotionally disconnected, and church is a little bit of it's a spiritual place, but it's an emotional place.
So what is church doing instead?
You want to go there? I think for a lot of men, church right now caters to women, not to men. And I'll leave it there.
I mean, I think that's a great and interesting point, but if church is catering to women, and that's where women are, and men know that women are there, why won't they at least come there to pursue the women?
Instead of going to the club, let's go to church
right,
instead.
Right. Because actually, I would imagine that the kind of men that are kind of with the status that you say, working, trying to get their money, they want also a certain woman, and I would imagine men would at least want a godly woman. So if the women reside in the church, why are the men not going there to pursue them?
That might raise a question, do they want a godly woman? I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean,
exactly
yeah, I guess it's true.
Yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Greg, you know?
I mean, these are just like, firstly, there are some really, really big kind of like meta questions here. And what Kojo and I were talking earlier on was basically around men committing to God in the first instance. And the reality of this society that we live in, as Kojo mentioned, highly individualistic, capitalistic. It's very much kind of like dog eat dog. You've got to make it on your own. And if not, well, like, good luck to you. But I just got back from Mexico where I was doing a bit of volunteering, and the churches there are just like full of men, like really, really full of men. And I was reflecting on our church here, and I was like, okay, well, what's different here? And one of the deeply profound and actually quite scary experiences that I had was, I was doing some volunteering there, some amazing people, amazing stories, like God is really working, and very, very humbling as well. But my next destination after Mexico was New York. New York, this metropolis, 20 million people. It's basically like, well, they call it the Empire State, right? It's like the empire of capitalism. And I kid you not, within a day or two, I was like forgetting about some of my experiences in Mexico, and I was getting like sucked into this all-absorbing environment that is telling me that I need to be bigger, better, bolder, but in a different way, not godly. And I'm like going back to the place where I'm staying, and I'm like, my prayer life is materially different than what it was in Mexico. Because in Mexico, I was like, the roads don't work here. The food that I'm eating is like upsetting my stomach. And I see the trueness, the reality of life. Whereas you come to places like New York or London and stuff like that. What we experience here, by the way, is we're in like the 0.1% of the global population. Like this is not normal. And obviously in these comforts, I was saying to Kojo, like these roads that we drive on in England, lots of people complain about them. Mate, they are streets of gold compared to what's out
100%.
there. Like 100%. And so the question that I have when you live in these cities, when you're in these environments is, God doesn't exist here. I don't need God here. So that's the bigger question to me. That's like the starting point, which is how do you get men to stop focusing on these places and what these things have to offer and get them to submit to God, commit to Him, turn up to church, and then also commit to a woman.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I've had that, just to piggyback on what you just said there, I think it's, I've asked, so why are men, the question is why are men coming to church? And I've asked men that I know what their answers were, like, what is your experience? And it's very much it's a big question, so obviously everybody's going to give you a personal answer of what their personal experience has been. And a couple of people have told me that their experience has been not having a role model to look up to. And just to say, like living in big cities and even church mixing up with the big cities kind of vibe, let's say, I think it transforms you somehow. What do I mean by that is that a couple of people have experienced pastors being very extravagant in their ways, or putting like money above things, about God, and above what the principle of church should be.
Yeah.
So I think that if you have that as an example, I'm pretty sure that it's going to kind of push you away from going to church, from wanting to go to church. And
As a man?
as a man, yeah.
Oh, so you're saying that is not attractive for men?
Yeah, that's not a role model. I've seen that it's, if that is how you behave in church, I can do that outside of church. I don't need to come to church to see that. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'm not gonna. I want to go into it, but
Well, anyway, that's the experience
No,
that
that
I've
is
heard
interesting.
about, because I wanted to hear from a man perspective, because I'm obviously not a man, so need to understand their point, and that's what came out.
She has a
I
point.
do like that point about location though, because I'm from Sheffield, right? So it's a lot more chill, it's a lot more calm. I think in a place like London, like the big cities, you've got a lot of options, like in general. So when I moved down to London from Sheffield, church, for example, you can hop around quite a lot. So I found it quite hard to actually build up a bit of a really close network to start off with. And so I think that can prevent at least women, for example, from being seen in church by certain men, because they already have like their own networks. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but for me personally, I would say location is definitely a big thing, because when I go back home to Sheffield, it's like you've got that church that's down the road and everyone goes there, and then you go to people's houses after service and stuff like that. You can get to know people on like a level. Whereas in London, everything's just so busy. You've got so many options. You can go to the shop in the morning. You can blah, 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 blah. So it can make it quite tricky sometimes.
You know, it's funny
on that
because
level.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was younger, we used to church hop. That's what young people do.
Church hop?
Yeah.
Like a church crawl.
Church crawl. We used to church crawl, and
It's going to search.
this is the point where we're looking for women. That's what guys are doing. But interestingly, we would go to people's houses for lunch regularly when I was younger. I don't know how much that happens now. Maybe you'll know. I don't know. Oh, it's not.
Don't tell them about my house. That's what they feel. I ain't opening the door.
You're not putting up lunch?
No, I'm not going to do that. But you know what's interesting? What you were saying is also a very powerful point. I think as you were talking, the answer popped to me. Men require hierarchy.
Yeah.
And when there's no hierarchy, and when there's not enough men in a hierarchy, men tend to dissipate. You know what I mean? And then going back to your point also about men looking at leaders, a lot of us as men, when we're in the world, right, and we come into church, we're always looking for someone who's better than us. Because if you're not better than us, then like you said, there's nothing I can learn from you.
So what are you saying, the church is feminized?
No, I'm not even going to say feminist. I'm going to say that the men who are, if men don't see men being better than them, which is what Christ is asking us to do, to be better than our nature, our carnal nature. If they don't see that, then it's like there's no point me being here, because in actuality, I'm not growing. I'm not going to actually become better than I am in the world. We actually know we're not good. So when we come to the church, we're looking for someone who's going to be like, okay, that man's like, he's a man who's integral. He's a man of his word. He's a man that holds people accountable. He does what he says. And I was saying to you earlier on about how men require consistency to be consistent. But when people are inconsistent, men can't be consistent with that person. You can call it trauma, you can call it attachment styles, call it what you want to call it, but men require that consistency. So when there isn't that hierarchy.
Consistency from who?
The person who's leading, and from the structure being seeing other men in that structure.
So men need to see men in leadership.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I think it's quite interesting though, because there has been a rise in men going to church. And so I think this might be a generational thing in terms of like, you know, from a certain age to a certain age, potentially maybe from, I would say, between 40 and maybe 35. I think that is the age gap where the men are really not kind of plugging in. And I do think there's a rise. And to your point, both of your points, in terms of, you know, men kind of needing some sort of like mentorship and leadership, that is actually really important, because when I think of every man that has actually gone to church, stayed consistent and progressed within the church, they've had a very strong mentor within the church body. So I think it's a really good point. I don't necessarily think it ties to monetary value, because what I have seen, for example, my younger brother, when I look at his kind of projection in the church, he got into church at university. It's a very community-based, you know, way to grow in the church. We've always been a church family, so I think he was desiring that connection on a deeper level. He got a fantastic mentor, and he's now kind of grown into leadership in the church. He's now married, he's got a wife, and he's now recently had a son, and he's young, he's in his 20s. So I do think that there is a rise in the younger generation for leadership within the church, and they are becoming more serious and kind of building that family and kind of career path side by side. So I think it may be quite generational.
I've got a question. If they're not in the building, where are they?
If they're not in the building, where are they?
In the streets.
Like what Jay said, clearly.
In the streets. We have to define in the streets. What do you mean?
Define how you want to define it.
Well, one thing that I'll just jump in there very quickly, and this, I've got a few friends who I grew up with, and we would go to church as kids, but they're not going to church now. And I think the reality, particularly in this country, is that lots of people, I think they can have a relationship with God without being part of a community. It's like, no, I believe in God, but I'm not going to church. Like, I don't need to go to church, or I don't need to be active in a community for me to believe. And I mean, I see that when I hear that response, I'm like, that's such a wishy-washy answer. But it's something that people genuinely believe. And so I wonder whether the men who, let's say, because there are in my mind kind of like two categories of men. There are men that were like born into Christianity, and then men that weren't, that are kind of have no idea really what it's like to be in that church environment. So starting with the people that were born into church, the reality is that the world will pull them, and there are women that are not godly that are also appealing to the eye, and guys go for that. Like I've seen it, I've experienced it. And they also then practice, because again, I actually see myself in some of my friends as well, where you're like, no, I kind of like, I believe that there's something out there, but at the same time, I'm basically godless. And then for the men that are outside the church, well, I guess they're probably just operating off of like common values, but also common misconceptions about church, and they're still part of a society that doesn't necessarily value faith.
Let's put it a little bit in perspective. The ratio of men to women is about 1 to 4 in the church. Maximum 1 to 8 in a lot of churches, right?
Is that here in the UK?
I was going to say, is this stats from the UK?
In the UK.
Specifically, right, okay.
In the UK. And
It depends on denomination as well.
Yeah,
or is
to be fair.
it depends on the denomination. This is true. This is interesting. And I have ideas. I don't want to say it yet, because if I don't do the research, Diane, I'm going to get in trouble. So if that's the case, we've got men walking away from the church environment, but women are at certain points in their life coming in. And we observe this, right? And there's like, they're moving in opposite directions. And I can't see men just doing themselves. I think they're in some type of relationship. So when we ask the question, where are the men? Where are they?
I do think, to your point with community, I think the pandemic has had a huge impact on so many different things as well over the past few years, because I guess, so for context,
there's some crazy interference going on.
Pandemic has had a huge impact on people's, I don't know, capacity or readiness to go into a church building, because I think before the pandemic it was like, it was just a normal thing, isn't it? And then now everything's online and people are quite anxious to go outdoors. I do think in general. It can be very, very overwhelming, especially in a city like London. So I do think there's a bit of a mental health factor in just coming into a church building, saying hi to people. It can be quite cliquey in church as well sometimes. So there's a few things there, but in terms of community, I do think mental health has an impact on.
So in answering the question, where are they? You're saying, in one sense, they're staying at home, trying not to socialize so much?
I mean, it might be more of a general point for everybody, but in terms of the men, I do get your point in terms of, what was you saying now? Something to do with role models and stuff like that, and just in general, less people being in church, less role models for men maybe, or just more options to kind of explore things online and so on and so forth. But so maybe the mental health impacting people in general also means less men. But also in terms of, since the pandemic, there's been more conversations about mental health, I guess. And I guess typically they tend to gear more towards women's emotions and how women feel, potentially. I know things have kind of changed, but I guess from my perspective, I know in my environment, most of the professionals are women that are therapists. So, and then when you come into a church environment, you talk about mental health conversations, they're mostly women. And so maybe potentially that's something to explore, whether the men are kind of involved in those conversations, feel involved.
In a sense, it sounds like you're saying that support for mental health is shaped around the women's narrative.
I told you.
Potentially, maybe there's a little bit of a factor.
I've heard this before.
It's more complicated, but then that probably.
Some men aren't in a rush to go for a therapeutic. I'll come to you. They're not in a rush to get help, because it's like they just feel like they're going to be spoken to by their moms.
Is that how you feel in there?
I'm just trying to interpret.
Is this you?
Let us know.
Things are going to come out of us, you know.
I'm curious to hear from the men though about this.
I think generally speaking, the differences between men and women is that women are more towards humanitarian and social, and I think it's normal to have more women in the therapeutic world compared to men. Men are more into things, there are, there's just a genuine difference between men and women biologically and mentally, anything. So that would, having this type of conversation might be something that women are more inclined to
Just to add on that, I think men find therapy by doing as opposed to just sitting and talking.
Yeah.
Like, why do men love going out and playing golf on the golf course and like talking to no one for hours as they're swinging or fishing or
So
something
we're
like
always
that?
doing our therapy, really.
So yeah, but it's like it's actually getting away from people. I mean, if you look at Jesus, right, like he withdrew into nature to spend time with God. I mean, men have replaced God with golf and fishing, but I think it's kind of like some similar dimensions there. The reality, although, is that I think men do struggle to talk about like the difficult things, or they will kind of like pacify things internally until they've figured it out, and then they can talk about it.
But then we're being pressured into talking and opening up when that's not how men want to really want to do things.
That's right. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, when you give men the space, they don't be quiet. So, respectfully,
They don't inquire.
they don't be quiet. So, like, they actually just offload, especially within a safe space and amongst other men. And so, what you find is when you go to the barbers, for example, you might have you'll talk about football, what have you. You might have a conversation about, like, I don't know, something a bit more personal, and then you get over it. But there is actually conversation within these spaces, like the barber shops, like, when you guys go and watch football, and and correct me if I'm wrong. And also, I was going to say, there's what I've seen is that when there are sometimes events put on specifically for men in the church, men don't tend to engage as much, even if it is for men.
Yeah, you're right.
And if they do engage, they will do it like right at the last minute. So again, it makes it difficult to plan and organise. So I don't know. I mean, feel free to.
You're right.
What do you think
To
is
share.
Well, because first and foremost, I think the question we talked about is why men are not in church, and I think that's the wrong wording, because men are builders. So there has to be something that we have to achieve. You understand what I'm saying to you? We need reward from building something. So like you were saying about doing something, right? So when we say about church, actually the thing is community. We don't have community. Women are actually very communal. Wherever women go, they find themselves in community. Men don't operate that way. There has to be something that we agree on and we build on. It's a natural thing, And we don't necessarily have that necessarily in church. So there has to be something that they're going to build and achieve within that space for them to want to come into, because there has to be an achievement at the end. Because when we are dealing with our issues as a man to man, I don't need you to therapize me. I need answers. Have you got an answer, Greg? Greg's got an answer.
That's
Okay,
what
fantastic.
men do. We want to provide answers.
Mansplaining and men giving solutions, isn't it?
That's what it was.
That's what it is.
Yeah. We can't spend time just talking about our feelings all the time, because it's like we're not doing anything with it. You know what I mean? It's like we're just sitting there. Whereas we do have to learn something from women too. Like sometimes it's good just to talk and just hear things, but majority of the time, the world is asking us, what is the solution?
But this is maybe where the problem lies, because actually the end goal and the gift is salvation. So I think to your point, Greg, it's all about having a relationship with Jesus first, and then you can
I was
kind of.
just going to jump on that, which is like, you are building something, but it's your character. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what needs to happen in your life for you to wake up. But like, what we're building here is not a physical building. We're not building your empire, your whatever. Like, it is your character. And that's the starting point. And then we go and build other things as well. Of course, like we'll go do some projects or something like that. But ultimately, it's like, church by and large is intangible. Like, the early church was just a community of people that came together to build character and to go and spread the faith and the belief in God. So yeah, the one thing that's in all of this that is just coming to the front of my mind is like, seek and you shall find. But like, what are you seeking? Because what you are seeking is what you will find. And so my question above all of this stuff is like, what are men seeking?
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask a question off the back of that. The church is on average 70-30, 70% women, 30% men on average, right? And I want to go back to that original question, which kind of partially intersects with yours. Who are they in relationships with?
I think themselves, personally, that's what I would say. But
It's like saying the majority of men who are not in the church are single.
Oh, they've got Gab, It's just not
That's the
church.
question.
Yeah,
What
100%.
did you say?
100%.
They have?
They've got ladies out there, it's just not in the church.
Oh.
Seek and you shall find. Like,
We will
I want a
find.
girl. No, it's true. It is true.
So in a sense, we're saying men for some reason, and we're talking about then drawing from what you're saying, urban, cityfied men aren't looking necessarily for godly women. They're just looking for, they are seeking something else.
If I may jump in here, because it's hot off the press, or that has been a few years now actually, but the reality is that like we are in a battle. We're in a battle between God and the devil, good and evil, and the devil is working overtime to try and pull humanity away from God. Like that's what he's doing, that, and he's using deception, all sorts of tactics to try and distract us and pull us away from God. And one of those levers that he can pull is obviously women, but women that are not truly of God, if that makes sense.
They're willing to give up the sex easier.
What do you mean, sorry?
I'm glad you said it, because you know what? I was thinking.
Because if men are being pulled, we're coming to it. If
Yeah.
we're being pulled away,
Yeah,
we're talking about into other relationships.
Yeah.
There has to then be a difference between the relationships that they could have in a church,
yeah.
because the church is full of women, and the relationships out. What is it that they're seeing and have access to or getting a benefit from
Yeah.
outside?
So I would say that the reality, and Kojo, you come in as well. The reality is that, like, men obviously do want to be in relationships and to have someone. The devil knows that too, and he'll present something that is like attractive, but the person won't be drawing you to the principles that God wants you to live by, and it'll be subtle.
And the question is, what is it that they're drawn to?
Like, what's the difference between, I guess, a godly, but what is a
I
godly?
get it. It's like, it is ultimately intimacy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Streets.
What is that?
I mean, you keep saying the street.
I know. That's Kojo's logo.
Expand on that, actually. What do you mean by the streets?
What you just said is the streets.
No, what
the
you
ladies,
saying?
the ladies that are,
Don't put words
the
in
ladies
my
that are
mouth.
not of God, the ladies are not of God, that are allowing you access to something that you should be having access to in marriage. It's the streets.
But do you think that even the ladies outside of church give it up quicker or easier?
It's not going to give it out easier or quicker, but the rules are we can do that.
Okay.
In
Yeah,
if you're
that's
dating
true.
someone who loves the Lord, that's not what we should be doing. You know what I'm saying to you?
Is the
Yeah.
flesh, right?
It is the flesh.
That's
It is the flesh, but I think if we really, okay, let's nail it, right? Because the reality of the situation is, right, men are not coming to church because, first of all, like I said, you said it correctly, right? If they have to love the Lord first and foremost. But the reality is, church actually had families.
Yeah.
So when families are broken, there is no community for men to come into. So when men are inconsistent, when they come into a space, they're looking for consistency. For instance, when you said about the intangibles, you're right, but it becomes tangible when I see you doing it. Of course. So if you love your wife and you love your family, I see that, and there is something in me that will long for that. But if I don't see that, so you're preaching good, you spoke about this, Curtis, you preach good, but actually I don't see the love of God working through what you're doing, then I don't need to be there. I can do everything I can do and get it on the streets. So why come into that space?
So on one hand, we've trained men to we've trained them to just go and get themselves inadvertently by not having an example. So we've got we have men in the church, and most churches are led by men and First Lady. But I think men can see that there is no true, deep, desirable example there. I think it might lend to the question of, are the relationships that they're seeing in churches something to aspire to?
But I'll just say this, like, I mean, you look at a dog, for example, you give it a bone, no matter if there's a ball nearby or something like that, like, it is going for the bone. And men operate like animals, like, that's ultimately what the flesh is, right? Which is, there's something which is so, it's got me, and it's very difficult to let go of, and it becomes a trap.
So you're referring to their relationships outside the church?
Yes, and my point being is that you could turn up to a church once in a while because your parents have said, like, let's go to church today, and you've got to turn up. And you might see that there is an amazing family over there with 3 beautiful kids and a loving couple. But what you've got outside has got you hot. Exactly.
So this is what I'm looking at, and I
Yeah.
think we're trying to start answering it.
Of course.
We know there's a force that's pulling,
Yeah.
and I think most guys, if they want sex in the church, they can get it. But what is it? What is the difference between outside? You've kind of touched on something, and I don't know if there's any more. In my opinion, I need to go. In my opinion, I think the ease at which sex can be accessed, because I don't know if there's anything else that they would be drawn to. There's attractive women in and out of the church. There are nice women. I know that there's a whole narrative of man has to have 6 figures and all that nonsense, but I don't think the majority of women are like that. So I'm like, what are they accessing out there that they don't want to come in here and get?
But it might even be that that contention that actually, even if they do come in to the church and potentially are doing stuff outside, they might feel there might be that contention or that conviction that, oh my gosh, okay, I actually do need to walk right with the Lord. And actually, even when we think about dating and what that looks like within the church, a man has to truly be ready and want that before he pursues it, you know? So it's like, I think even the narrative of dating within the Christian space is a little bit unclear for what or how that should look, right? So, I think.
Well, go on.
Yeah.
So again, the reason why it's unclear is because men are looking for people to be better than them. So I keep saying that you need to see someone. Okay, for instance, Curtis, when we spoke about this about 2 years ago, right? You gave a great example. If I'm preaching, I need to live it. If men see other men live it, I promise you, it doesn't matter if you're for Jesus or if you're not for Jesus, men will follow. Jesus is the main thing we're trying to get to salvation. But outside of that, the principles remain the same for men. That's why men can build community when they're not in church. They can build community elsewhere. Why do men go to a golf club? They build community there, right? So men are looking for other men to be inspirational. So I need to be inspired by what you do. So if you love your wife, let me see it. If you love church, you love Christ, let me see it. I need to always see it. That's what men want. They want to see you do it. And when they see you do it, they go, okay, how did you do it?
Yeah.
And then you can teach them that, this is how I do it. And then they're looking for you to be consistent. And when they walk with you, they see that you're actually a person who's consistent. They're like, okay, now I can follow that role. And that's how us as men are. That's us, I feel like, as men we are.
Yeah, and just to jump on that, and as well with the whole family point that you were saying earlier, is like, I don't know if that's the case, because I've just been in like coming to church not for long anyway. So, but generally speaking, I think that if within the family, the father comes to church, the whole family will follow.
Yeah, that's true.
If it's just a mom going to church, there might be I don't know, I might stay home with dad today kind of thing.
I don't know the stats, but there are some serious stats that back that up.
Yeah.
I want to say like 90% of children end up staying in the church if the father is like going or something,
Yeah,
something
and
like that.
it's like you say, like that. Your father is your first role model as a boy, right? Even as a girl, but it's your first role model. So you want to follow what.
This is a lot of pressure on men.
It is. I was thinking the exact same thing.
They
It's a
do,
lot of pressure
they
on
do.
men.
But it's due pressure though, isn't it? It's not like, it's not unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good kind of. I think it's a healthy, maybe, if you want to put it out, it's a healthy pressure in a way. Because if you do build your character to look like and to behave like God is teaching us, then that's a good thing to look up to.
I think a better word to use is responsibility. Like
That-
it is
yeah.
responsibility for yourself and the people that are in part depending on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe this point, because I wanted to throw a slight spanner in the works,
Please.
I can't even lie. So I've had a lot of conversations with people, men and women, about the whole, when I said fear, I also meant feeling intimidated. So I've had a lot of conversations with women and men about, are men intimidated by certain women in church?
I was just going to ask this question.
Oh,
Thank you.
Interesting
Are
point.
men intimidated by certain women in church because over time, women have become more, I don't want to say more accomplished, but you know what I mean? Like
Powerful.
having careers,
Yeah.
Scary.
having
Yep.
cars,
They've
houses,
upped the
and all
levels.
that jazz.
Ooh.
So I don't know if men look at women and be like, she don't need me. She don't need me to lead because she's leading her life already. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that's, but also it kind of becomes a bit of a tricky one because for women,
Why are you laughing? I want to know why.
we still want men that will lead.
100%.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I feel like, I know for me personally, you know what I'm saying? So
But what does society show
I don't want to
you?
lead at home. You get me? Like,
Yeah.
I don't just, my career's over
I
there.
agree with you.
Like when I go home, like
That's right. Go deep.
I agree
So,
with you, but it's what's been seen in society. That's the thing. It's like people just, if you just look live through the social media, which is what everybody does, you're just gonna see that women are empowered and like, yeah, that's what things have changed. All of the women want that, but it's actually not true. There are many women, like you said, that want to be led. I don't know if you guys like salsa, but if you go salsa, you want to have a good man leading you. Because if you don't have a good man leading you, you're not going to have fun dancing.
That's deep.
So
Deep.
it's the same with like life, I think. So
What do you want to say, Diane? I heard you.
I'm just agreeing with
Jumping
what
in.
all of these guys are saying, 'cause it's so true.
That's a yes.
It's, yeah, 100%. Click, click, click.
When you play, what's the
I'm not going to say what I want to say. I'll say it afterwards. Nah, because it's a bit flippant. It's a bit flippant. But fundamentally, I actually don't agree with that statement.
Do you think that women have got reasonable standards, or present in a way that is? Oh, hold on.
All right. See that's God helping me not say what I was going to say. I might say it offline. Yeah.
That screeching sound is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because it's frustrating, but also, for me, back to your point, this is the devil doing his devices.
Of course.
Because actually, when you look at how later on I think it's in Hebrews where they talk about the restructure, it should be God, then the man, then the wife, then the children and the servants, what have you.
Yeah, that's it.
It is me then. Okay. Because put it down. I've got electrical currents in my buttocks, so apparently.
So Diane, you were saying, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying that it is frustrating because it does just seem like it's the enemy. We look at things like the scripture talks about, it's not flesh and blood, but it's higher principalities and powers. And so I think that it's just so interesting that he's attacking the head,
Yeah, of course.
you know. And so absolutely all of these points are so valid because they play a role in why the men aren't in the church. But it's definitely a spiritual thing,
100%.
you know.
Can I ask a question? We've got about 10 minutes left. What do you think the church in general has to learn about how to
Bring men in.
grow the family, I guess,
Yeah.
of the church? So if I were a pastor, what would you be telling me to do to grow this church?
I do think, when we was talking about spaces for men, I do think there's a bit of a both and in that sort of situation, because we're talking about, spaces for men in terms of like practical spaces, and then also spaces for men that's kind of like more like open, like talking about stuff. I do think there needs to be more kind of spaces that gear to both. That's just my personal opinion, because when, say for example, working in mental health, for example, I work with lots of young men at the moment. More times what we do is we go and play basketball. We do things like we like talk about things in a different way, and et cetera, like we get, it's more practical based kind of like interventions. So I do think within the church, and I'm not just talking to pastors, I'm talking to like, leadership team people, like having those spaces that are both like practical and both like open, talking about emotions and stuff, because I don't know if you guys know, you probably do, Pastor Philip Anthony Mitchell, he's become really like, famous or whatever on social media. And when I watch him preach, he's very like, I can see why potentially men might like his approach. Because he's very to the point, should I say? To
Direct.
the point, very practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of that as well.
But going back to the Word of God and having that understanding, I think there's something about him that he truly understands who Christ is, what Christ has done, and he's like, you don't need to wake up. And so, to your point, I agree. Yes, he's very raw in his approach, but he has to be, because actually I think a lot of people aren't as raw in their approach, in the urgency of coming to Christ.
Well, interesting in your point, when we identified it's actually true, men are coming back to church. I wonder what church they're going to. And I wonder if they're going to churches where the messages are given in a certain way, maybe clinical, maybe they're having a more black and white approach to religion, maybe less emotive, maybe. I wonder what they're going.
Now you're coming somewhere, because you're going to touch on something, I'm going to talk about it. I think the reality of the situation is because a lot of churches have too many preachers, not enough teachers. Men want to learn. So when you have preachers, they are inspiring people, but maybe it's misogyny, maybe we're very clear. Men don't like that. It's too fluffy. You know, when the message is very preachy, there's no meat in it. So for us men, we like to sit and learn. That's how we deal with each other, right? So when you have a teacher, like for me, I'm drawn to teachers. When I hear someone preaching, I get, what did I learn?
I have no interest in preachers myself.
That's why we linked up, right? Because we need someone who has wisdom. So as men, we're looking for other men. Has he got wisdom? Does he have more wisdom than me? I need to sit down and listen to him and take what I can from him. But when you're preaching, it's like you're trying to, and that's where I think men get turned away. It's like, for women, they respond to preaching. I think for men, we really respond to teachers. Like, we need that. It's not me saying that shame any women. I just think it hits on two different fronts. So when you have a lot of churches with a lot of preachers, which I always think that preachers are not pastors, but anyway.
I absolutely agree.
You know, so I think you need more people who actually like Philip Mitchell is powerful because he's direct. That's why men like him, because men like language that's direct, right? And actually how men deal with each other is in a direct format. And this is me studying relationship aspects. Women can be very indirect. They flowery with it. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that men just don't respond to that. It's like, so when we start hearing a man doing that and he's preaching in that way, that's why men say it's for women, because he's talking in a way that responds to women. That's why women are in the church, is responding to them. But if he goes there and he starts being direct, straight to the point, letting people know, here's A plus B and it equals C, because men like equations. It has to be A plus B equals C. If it's A plus B, then it's algebra X and trying to figure out all that stuff. He's like, allow it. You're not giving me a straight equation. That's what I found for men, personally.
Is it a straight equation or a simpler equation? Because you
Simpler.
started,
okay, simpler equation. Simpler equation. Yeah, you're right. Simpler equation. We don't want it too complicated.
Yeah.
You're right.
And the thing is, we're not saying either is bad. It's just that we're identifying
For men,
differences.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, guys.
No, I was going to say, but the thing is, the church is a body. It's not just the pastor, and it's not just on Sundays. So there's more to the church than the preaching on the Sunday. You know, there's other things that men should and can access outside of just the preaching on a Sunday from the main pastor. So what kind of how does that tie into it? Do you know what I mean? For men.
We've built a culture around church. That's the problem. We've built an auditorium with audience and a pastor. So that's what people believe Christianity is now. Like church is not this church. Church is the body, like you're saying. But we've put the idea as association that as a church, that's Christianity. So when men are thinking about Christianity, they're thinking about a church. They're thinking about the auditorium, the pastor there, and the audience here. But you're right, it's activism. It's actually been out there. But we don't preach that way to say that church is more than just the church. We preach in the sense of come to this church, come to a church. But actually, church is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So if we start preaching that, maybe men will be okay with it.
I would like to add to that, and it's my opinion, of course. Right? I think that the lights and the music is attractive into the feminine. That's my opinion. And so I think that when we say church, whether we call it the body, spiritually, practically, physically, a building, whatever we call it, I think that the experience is centered around who's walking through the door. So the church that I came from was 90% women. But it was a very, very straight down the road masculine church, in the sense that it was like, this is the teaching and so forth, a very conservative church. But generally churches now, we call them charismatic.
Yes.
I think that they're centered around, well, the majority, you know when I first realized this? TD Jakes, no disrespect. TD Jakes, no woman thou art loosed. That created a trend. Women were flocking through the doors because he was speaking their language. They're the tithe payers. We've got to make sure that they stay. But I don't think anyone worked, I mean, Jakes did a good job in his own way, but most churches haven't worked out how to get the men through the door. They've centered it around the audience that is actually there. And I think that the church will grow double if we learn how to bring the men through the door.
Yeah, no, but like you're saying, I think it is the community that you create outside of the sermon and the preaching and everything. And I think it's harder when you got a bigger church as well. How do you manage that? And I think you guys managed to organize things like this here because it's not a huge a massive church where like there are lots of people coming into this church, but you still manage to have the little groups and the family vibe that you can get, and you get to know everybody, because it's not that big that everybody just finishes. The sermon is over and everybody just goes away. Like you stay here, you chat, and I think it's harder when you want to try to build something like that in a bigger church, generally. So maybe
definitely big church. Yeah.
like the smaller, the better.
I mean, it's funny. I come from a big church, and I would say that there's quite a good size of men there. A lot of the men are married. A lot of the men have got family, but there's also a lot of single men. Yeah, I would say there's a reasonable amount of single men, and there's become a lot of younger men that have come into the church.
What is the ethnicity primarily?
It's quite mixed, but I would probably say it'll probably be predominantly black, but there is a mix as well. There was quite
What do you think your church is doing? Because we're trying to look for these men now.
Do you know, I think, and this is why I
So
said
what?
it's not about the preaching so much. I think that when you come to the church, you just feel the sense of community. You feel it. They do so many different things across the event calendar. They engage men. They do men retreats. They do like men hangouts. They do men coffee mornings. They do things for women. They do things for grieving wives. They do like things for children. They do things.
So they focus on meeting needs.
I mean, maybe that might be a good
Trying
point.
to interpret,
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just telling you what they're doing. Yeah, they have like a youth concert, like a youth, this
Youth
like
events.
youth event. Yeah, they really do like
So different spaces, isn't it?
for everyone. I feel like there's something for everybody, quite literally.
What's the headship? Men?
Yeah, I would say predominantly. Again, I think it's quite a mix actually, but I would say yeah. Yeah, it's a male pastor, but to be fair to you, he's new. So there was a transition within the church. I joined within the transition, to be fair, but even with that, it seems like the pastor, I know it took some time for them to get someone new. They didn't just like stick somebody in, right? So when I joined, I found that information out, and I found that for me was profound, because I thought, you guys care about who carries the baton. So it seems as though the other pastors that were in leading the church done a fantastic job to get it where it was, and he has carried the baton. And honestly, I'm quite new, so I'm hearing what other people are saying, and they're just like, this is amazing. And on 2 Sundays ago, I saw 51 people get baptized.
51?
51.
Wow.
How many men?
Wow.
I can't tell you how many
Roughly.
men there were, but I would say it was probably, I wouldn't say half,
Just a bit
but I would
less.
say maybe about 60-40.
Now, this is a question that we won't answer today, but is it all right if we just get some of our ladies to come down to your church to find a husband? Is that all right to go to church
Oh, to find
look
a
for a
husband.
man?
Leave them for us, please. Please and thank you.
It's still not enough. There's still not enough men in your church.
I didn't say it's 50-50, but it's definitely, I would say it's probably maybe 40-50, I would say.
And the single guys are the younger guys.
I think the singles are the youngest. There was an event that I should have actually gone to and I didn't. And then there's another event actually. Do you know what? I'll share the events because I think people should come to these events because I think anyone could meet anybody.
It needs to happen. We have to just,
Yeah.
we just need to just
But
go
they
church
do
to
have
someone.
a games night for singles. I think it's over 35s.
Really?
Link us up.
Okay. We'll put the address on the screen in a minute.
I think it might be like in the next week or two there.
Okay. I'll do some Instagram
Yeah.
reels and stuff like
Yeah.
that. We need some more single events, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do.
Speed date
But
in the
maybe we
church.
can
We need
amongst
that.
ourselves.
Church
We
speed
can do
date.
that and then amongst ourselves.
Okay.
as well.
So we'll be working together.
100%.
Here we are. I'm here for that. We've got space. We've got chairs.
Absolutely.
We've got couches. Speed dating in church. What do you reckon? Okay. Time. Listen,
Yeah.
guys, look, we didn't get all the answers, but actually a lot of insight. I want to thank you for just scratching the surface on this issue.
Genuinely, yeah.
And being honest, yeah. But you know, this is my church, and some of our churches, we have a lot to learn from this discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing it.
Pleasure. We're going to pray. We asked you for guidance, we asked you for insight, and you gave it to us. What matters now is what we do about it. We thank you for the humility, the experiences, the frankness from all the participants. And we thank you for this event, and that you'll show us exactly what we need to do to grow this church by finding out where the men are. And we appreciate your Holy Spirit in guiding us in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.